I know teachers right now are into their 40s who are still paying college loans off.
The people that aren't in education complain about what we're not doing in education. You're like, all right, so the people that are doing cool stuff, you almost have borderline a moral obligation to say, all right, this is what I'm doing then.
If you don't have a plan, okay, right, wait for it, you're going to be poor.
Like, be lazy. Well, if I'm training people to be teachers, be lazy. Yeah, shut up and let them do it.
There's two emotions that I straddle, right? Is hope and worry. So I'm worried to death about kids, but I'm super hopeful about the future.
Education wants the instant gratification. They want the weeds. They don't want the trees.
CTE is coming gangbusters for the traditional, practitioners who don't want to even entertain moving things around for the sake of efficacy.
Do we need as much time as we need to do school?
I mean, if you're asking a 14-year-old, they're going to tell you a weekend would be fine. But no, I want to challenge kids.
If you're about to listen to this podcast, buckle up.
You're listening to the Disrupt Education podcast. Here are your hosts, Peter Hostrawser and Alli Dahl.
Welcome back to the Disrupt Education podcast. We are back. Alli Dahl, I'm Peter Hostrawser. We got Jason Van Nus with us. So first off, if this is your first episode, go back to the one before.
Part two.
Yeah, right.
Maybe part 4 of this series. Well, I actually, okay, so when we were discussing doing this, I'm like, some of my favorite podcasts have featured guests, and I always they have people they bring back semi-regularly, and there's some of those podcasts, I actually only listen to my favorite guests. I'm not saying do that, listeners, because we have awesome guests all the time, but I'm saying we're trying something different with someone we really enjoy talking to and has so many, just the way you present ideas, Jason, and talk about these ways to disrupt education. It's fueled by so much expertise and passion, and we just really want to elevate that.
Thank you.
I wanted to kind of kick off this episode tying into what we were ending the last one with. We were getting really excited about, and I was getting passionate, feeling emotional about pathways and putting students to failure. And I wanted to share this experience of public speaking. And I avoided, so I went to Truman State University for my undergraduate, and they had a public speaking course requirement. And all of the communication professors or adjunct at Truman knew it was a graduation requirement. And so they made it intentionally very challenging.
Yes.
And it was just a ridiculous requirement. Well, I, as someone who saw an opportunity to circumvent the challenge, actually took the public speaking class at a community college over the summer, because I was so terrified of public speaking. It's hard to imagine now. I mean, I public speak every day for my job and on podcasts. Yeah. I was so terrified that I would fail because I wasn't pushed to failure in high school enough. And this, whatever, speaking in front of peers, doing presentations, still rattled me. I take this class, and I have, just the most incredible instructor, and really did a really good job of tearing down fears and building this really strong culture and community within the class. And these are people from all over the state taking this class and whatnot. And I ended up, it was so transformational. I ended up being the chosen speaker in this class to synthesize our experience. And I went from this really terrified human, and it really was transformational. And I was pushed to failure because my first speech was awful. Yeah. I mean, everybody's was and the teacher just was it's okay. Let's do it again.
Yeah.
It's okay. Let's do it again. And I come back to that experience because I didn't know what I didn't know. Yeah. And I think about the reverse career fair and how you talked about how students hate it before they do it and then love it afterwards. And it actually was one of the turning points for me of wanting to be in education or be a speaker of some kind was that course. Yeah. I never knew how much I enjoyed it, how much I could use my voice and communicate with authority. And so you need those experiences, students need those experiences. We have to let them fail.
Absolutely. And so, but so think about this. So that's interesting, because and so you're a chemistry teacher, correct?
Yep. Yep.
Okay. So in the trad educational system, a little higher stakes class than maybe what Pete or I teach. Um, Teachers are very nervous about students failing their class, especially academic classes, especially classes that are required for college graduation. And so I'm not saying fail the class. I'm saying that if a kid comes in and they have all hundreds, you're not pushing them, right? Now, yeah, there's gonna be that one kid who knows more than you, right? And that always happens. Like that's why I never wanted to teach like coding because it wasn't my strength, and I don't want, But you can't be scared to learn from kids either. Kids have good ideas, and I think that we're not advocating for students to fail. Like you're gonna fail this class, or we're not like advocating for this this norm reference grading style where I can walk into class the first day and say, "There's 100 of you in this class." 10 of you are going to fail, 10 of you are going to make 100s, the rest of you, like, that's not what we're talking about. This is not this norm reference bell curve type. We're saying, don't just let a kid do enough to get by. Like Jim Collins' Good to Great book, right? Good is the enemy of great. Like education has gotten to the point where you mentioned earlier, our model's good enough. Our plan is good enough. We don't want to change it. We don't want to change it. No, change it. And because good is the enemy to great. And you got to push those kids. Look, if you really want to be good at this, you've got to fail. But I'm here. Fail in this environment where I can help you and then rebuild you, right? But kids don't want to. Kids get mad when they don't do right. If the kid can't do it perfect, if they turn something in and they get a 99 on something, they're kids who are like, why lose a point? And I was like, because you're not perfect. Like, I mean, and so it's like, but I mean, why isn't it 100? And they're just floored that they didn't get it. And I'm like, look, it's okay. Like, let's worry about your grade later. Did you learn the content? And so that's what people are. They're so great because again, college is the goal, not the process. And if college is the goal and grades are how you get there, it's not about did you learn the content and can you leverage the content for success? It's about do you have the grades and are they good enough to get into college? Because it's all about the next step and college is the goal. It's not the process. The career should be the goal. College is just the process for the career, but people don't get that. They don't get that. And I want to say, like, this is a really interesting story, kind of going back to what Peter said a little bit earlier, maybe toward the end of that back episode. And I want to share this real quick story. It's actually the full story that's on my LinkedIn, on the featured section on my LinkedIn page. And I got a chance to do like a crowdsourced keynote with some colleagues, and it was about storytelling. And so I'm telling a story. My story is about mentorship. And so I go through the process of how, I was a psychology major, and then some stuff happened. I don't want to ruin the story, but at the very end of the story, it's like a 7-minute story. At the very end of the story, I'm teaching graphic arts at my previous high school. That was what I taught, and I loved it. Man, it was so much fun. And so there was a young lady who was a senior, and she took my class as a first semester senior because she was an art student who was AP across the board, super like brilliant student, top 10 of the class. So we get back from spring break and she comes into my office and she's like, "Hey, Mr. V, I gotta tell you something." And I was kind of the joke I made was, "Hey, I'm a mandatory reporter. I don't know what you did on spring break," kind of laughing a bit. She was like, No. I just want to let you know I changed my major." And I was like, "Well, weren't you pre-med?" And she was like, "Yeah, I was." And I was like, "Oh, that's cool. What are you doing?" She goes, "Well, I changed to graphic communications." And so like it's one because you like I should what should my action have been, right? She loves the content. She loves the content. This is what she wants to do. But you know what my response was? Terrified. So the story, I leaned back, I grabbed my calendar and she's like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "I'm making room for this parent teacher conference because I just turned your parents' pre-med baby into an art major. So I'm sure I'm going to get called to the office for this one." That's the mentality that even someone who, like me, who has this gentle, disruptive spirit about asking questions and why, I was terrified that I had a success story and that success story was a pre-med person. Well, that young lady now is a graphic designer. She is doing phenomenal. I was terrified. I didn't want to get in trouble because I took an AP kid, an academic kid, the school's bell, like their prized possession, and turned them in. I didn't do it on purpose, but turned them into an art major. Like that's what school should be, but we don't want kids to pivot because they're pivoting. And so I guess I even myself bought into that dichotomy of academics here, everybody else over here. Like if that's the rules of the game that we're playing in, I was scared that I was going to get in trouble for mixing those two baskets together, right? And so that's I hadn't thought about it in that perspective, but I guess even people like us, when you see it happen and when you're responsible for it, you're like, oh, what's gonna happen? Am I gonna lose my job? Is mom gonna be mad at me? So it's tough. It's tough. It's not always easy pushing the envelope.
I think that goes back to your culture versus strategy right there, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Like that's the culture of that institution or that district or what have you is, and I've been in different cultures. I mean, you've been in different cultures, like, I mean, you can disrupt so much in certain cultures. And then, at a certain point, I think, and we talked about this on our way back episode, but I think, just kind of to echo off of that, a lot of our IT students in internships, we had a moment where we brought together our second semester, they're seasoned interns. They've already done a semester, and then we had new ones coming in. We circled them up, had a conversation, and a lot of it, you're asking questions like, what kind of advice would you give somebody coming into this program? What was something that you didn't know about, blah, 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 those types of, good questions that they want to pass along their experiences. And almost every one of the IT students who were all, again, very high standard education, 99% students, etc. The first thing that shocked them was when their code came back to them 3 or 4 times, not just once. It came back to them 3 or 4 times. And it was funny because they were humbled, just like they failed. They failed more than once. And, these were kids who were high flyers in the classroom, in their projects, etc. But when it came to a team and everything like that and true agile work, they were stumped a little bit. But the greatest part about that was they were able to understand that this is part of the process. So that process that you're talking about was happening in the experience or in the internship. A lot of them are like, don't go ask your supervisor right away. I mean, give it a go, try something. We've had different students, even in marketing, they were forced to fail because they didn't know. So we had a marketing student working in a financial firm, and he had no idea about financials and that wasn't his thing. Never took an accounting class. He used ChatGPT to teach him about financials. Now, why does that happen? Because it has to, because experiences force people to fail. And I think that, and again, they came back and we, as us, I'm guessing you do this as well, Jason, as you coach them through some of these things. You ask them the higher end critical thinking questions. However, you help them, guide them a little bit, but you don't hold their hands, because this world is tough. And I think one of the quotes that my colleague Brett and I always come up with and say to young people coming into this is like, yeah, you've done pretty well in academia. You brought value to your K through 12 or K through 10 or wherever you are. Now let's start building that value out there, because it's not the same value. And that's kind of where, I just wanted to share those stories, because I'm sure you have some about these
it's not
students
real world
being
though, right?
pushed.
It's not real world.
Yeah.
Like if our job is to prepare students for the real world, they should never be able to get a 100 in our class. And I know people are gonna be like, no, Jason, that's crazy. You can't punish a kid. I'm not saying punish a kid.
Right.
But I'm saying is, how often do kids, there is no job I've had as a professional where I don't fail. And our educational system is not set up to embrace failure. It's set up to avoid failure. So we have these snowflakes when they get out and they're doing these internships and they fail, and their boss says, hey, I need you to redo that. And they start crying on the job because no one's ever told them, you're not perfect. like they've got to learn. Like, and I'm not saying do it to be mean. Like I love working with kids. All of us could make more money in the private sector. Like we like working with kids. What I'm saying is we have to be real with these kids and say, that's why I love work-based learning, is because when I put a kid in an automotive facility and they put the tire on wrong, that car doesn't leave the shop. The boss comes back and says, that's wrong, fix it. And they have to learn how to deal with failure. It is so real world, but we don't mimic that in education, in the classroom. I think CT does a great job of mimicking that because we're hands-on. Like you can't, if you're building birdhouses to sell as a fundraiser, the birdhouses can't suck, right? Like that's like, but do we do it in the academic setting? We have to be willing to push kids to failure, but we're scared of parents. And here's another reason why I think that ultimately we ask why about the academic and what happens when you start pushing past the academics. Well, academics, especially a school my size, it's big money. You know the difference between being valedictorian and number 4 in your class? Thousands of dollars in scholarships. So that's why parents get so involved and advocate for their kids' grades because, oh my gosh, you gave my kid a 99 and the person who's above them in their class got a 97 or 99 or a 98 or 90, whatever. Like they're competing for other stuff.
Right.
And that's why there's so much pressure in academics. So I don't want anyone to think that we're throwing people under the bus or schools or academic teachers. Like we need to have a comprehensive and a collaborative environment in our schools. But academic teachers are under so much pressure because the fruit of that are the scholarships for valedictorian and salutatorian and all these things. And it's like, man, that is like it's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy. The pressure is not based on economic identifiers. It's based on just parents being mad because their kid didn't get the grade somebody else did. And I'm like, man, it's tough. It's a tough situation.
And I think, along with that, I think like when you do put real people into classroom projects, no matter where you are, there is so much value to that. You can do projects for an external piece in any curriculum. And the more and more we do that, I think that's kind of a, as we start to take a look at like, okay, so what are some things that we should do? I wholeheartedly think that as much as people can come in and say, guess what? I'm a blacksmith and this is how I use my calculus, which they do.
Yes.
And so that was the first place. I mean, I had a student who was a blacksmith. That's why I brought it up. And he was like, oh, this is how I use calculus. And I would have learned calculus like nothing if I was hammering this thing out over a fire. And I'm like, boom, right there.
Real quick plug for your own podcast. Like, I believe it was Scott Carr. If I'm mistaken, I may have the name. Is Scott Carr the District C person? Is that a different person?
Dan Gonzalez.
No, District C is
Dan Gonzalez was District C. So those are 2 of my favorite episodes so far. And I got them conflated. But I actually have a meeting with Scott in tomorrow actually. But man, that District C podcast was legit. Like real world. That's what school needs to be. Like if it's engineering, why don't you bring in your trigonometry and your calculus kids and your engineering and your drafting kids and solve a problem together? Like man, that District C. Like I want to know more about that. Like so, if you're listening to this, like go back and look at that episode because that was like eye opening to me on that people actually get. Like he gets it. That was great. And I love that's what it should be. It's that collaborative effort to solve problems because we need problem solvers. You talk to people who are employers, they really don't care a lot about much other than problem solving.
Right.
Can you solve problems?
Yeah.
Can you see an issue and address it? So that's a lot of where we try to spend time. That's what the reverse career fair again was, not to belabor that point, but to solve problems. And it's not like a puzzle problem, but a multi-step systems process. Can you solve that? And some kids don't do it very well. But then afterwards, when they get that supportive instruction, it makes sense, and then they can adjust. So the next time they have to do it in real life, they have some failures to fall back on and say, I remember what happened when I didn't do it right that time. I'm gonna do it right this time. I'm gonna make sure I put the effort in.
You try an advanced reverse career fair for people who are going through it twice, put some different stakes on it.
I've thought about how to do that. I think in order to do that, I would have to kind of pull back on the first one and borrow some features. But I've thought about it. I'd love to brainstorm with you on how we can make that happen. That would be something that would be really unique.
So I kind of want to shift, but we talking about ways to kind of help students maybe advocate or communicate their learning in different ways and results and just parents or community members listening to this. And one of the ways, and this might take us a little bit off course to get back on course, is talking about ways to disrupt ed tech, but specifically kind of in the realm of how can students leverage free tools and build a portfolio and create their own narrative outside of the test score that they got in 9th grade in algebra.
Yes. So, oh man, so this is interesting. And Pete, tell me if you see this, but I have a lot of employers who are like, Jason, I don't want any more resumes because a kid can't differentiate themselves. A high school kid really, it's hard to differentiate themselves on a resume because they really don't have a lot to put on there. It's like, here's the school I go to, here's my expected graduation date. Here are the classes I've taken. I'm involved in my church. I'm involved in this club. But is any of that like hireable material? And so what we've started doing, or what I started doing, is using LinkedIn. And I'll just kind of go ahead and don't want to bury the lead there, but that's what we do. We use LinkedIn, and here's why. And this is, again, if you've got someone, a friend who is in an IT job, like this is not probably their favorite topic. But you know what I really don't like is when we put kids, well, here we go. I'm sorry. We put kids on these school safe platforms, right? Like a Google site, like you have a Google school and you have your Google email, you build a Google site and you put all your portfolio on this Google site. And Alli, it can be the best dadgum portfolio in the world that anyone's ever seen. But what one problem still remains? Employers don't search Google repositories for hiring. They're not going to go look at Google websites to hire. So you may have the most dynamic tool available, but the problem still is getting eyes on. Well, here's what I love about LinkedIn. Love, is a kid builds their profile. One, it's not tied to their email. Because when you tie a resource to a student's school email, what happens when they graduate? They lose access to the resource right at the very moment when they need it.
Yep.
Okay, that's one. Two, it's where employers already are. You're not going to convince industry to change platforms. That's where they're going there. They're going to Indeed or Monster or whatever, but that's where they're going. And three, my favorite reason is because it allows my students, it expands their opportunity to be recruited. Meaning that if I'm trying to get Alli to hire me, I'm going to send you my resume. I'm going to send you an email. I am actively trying to get recruited. But what happens when I do an interview on a podcast and Peter, who I don't even know exists, sees that interview and says, hey, that guy may be a good fit. And he looks me up on LinkedIn, he can recruit me passively. That's what I love about LinkedIn is I can actively share my LinkedIn profile with anyone I want to when I'm looking for a job. But people can also look me up or search for skills or search for industries on LinkedIn and find me when I'm not trying to be found. And that's what you're giving your students, that next level opportunity. You can put pictures, you can put videos, you can put artifacts, you can pin posts, you can write art. I'm not a big fan of, I'm not saying I'm a big fan, but I don't do a lot of having my students write. Okay. They write their resumes and stuff, but I don't have them do a lot of journals or reflections. But a lot of coordinators have them do journals and reflections on their job. Okay. Well, that's what you want to do. Have them do it on LinkedIn as a newsletter. Like we want to take our kids and go out into industry and we want to get this evaluation on a piece of paper. Well, guess what happens? Peter, what do you do with your evaluations when you get them? Where do they go? They go
My
in the filing
evaluations?
cabinet.
Oh, yeah.
They go in the filing cabinet right here.
Right.
And guess who sees them?
Right.
Nobody. But why am I not taking these evaluations and saying, hey, Peter, you just gave this kid a great evaluation. 100%. Would you mind going and endorsing them on LinkedIn? Because now that stays with the student in perpetuity. They can leverage it whenever they want to. Yeah. But if I take your evaluation and put it right here, no one's ever going to see it.
Yeah.
It could be the most beautiful, like superfluous evaluation ever. And it's not a tool for that kid because it's in my filing cabinet.
Right.
So LinkedIn, it is the best tool available in terms of free portfolios. We spend tens of thousands. Go to a conference and go talk to people who sell software, and they'll sell you a $10,000 to $20,000 thing that does what LinkedIn does, but not as good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And LinkedIn's free.
Yeah.
And LinkedIn's where employers are. Like I've had people try to convince me to use other products, and I was like, "How many employees do you have in your network?" Well, we're working on that. Well.
Right.
When you call me back when you solve that problem, because until then I'm going where my kids already have access to employers. It's not even close. It's the biggest professional social media network. It's like 33, 34 like million people. It's crazy. Why would we not put our kids there?
You know, there's a lot of other things that I'm thinking of, even with when we mentioned ed tech, right? And I think I wrote something in LinkedIn on this. It was about one of the places that you can start is what are the problems that are the challenges that are inside your school building, and how can students work on those challenges? I can't tell you enough how much, like anytime an administrator or a leader or a colleague asks me, how can we help? That's it right there. Let's give these kids like an authentic place to work on a problem within the school building. And I don't mean fluff. I do not mean fluff. I mean like, hey, we got some traffic problems outside at 7 a.m. and 2:30 p.m. or whatever. Let's take a look at this is why I kind of like, honestly, and I do want to scare ed tech a little bit, because we have students in our buildings that can create and code and use AI to create something just as good as all this ed tech. And it's coming. So when you say there's a lot of money in academics and that part, you're right, there is. How do we fund that? How do we, how do we fund helping our students actually build something within the school? For instance, we do have cybersecurity classes at our school. And one of the things that they would do is they did, an email phishing event. And they would teach the teachers how to, double check an email, not get caught into, okay, it's Jason, but there's two S's in the email. And they would catch and they would give the data back to our IT department. Our IT department was paying over six figures to have a company come in and do that. We were in a big district, but to do that. Right. So hello, taxpayers, same thing, right?
Absolutely.
Let's find ways to give these kids cash for the value that they're bringing, and while they're learning, the curriculum.
A quarter of that money goes to the kids, and then another quarter of that money goes to the program, and then the school pockets half the other money. I mean, that is exactly what I think schools should be doing. I mean, in real world stuff, like, you have a culinary program. Hopefully they have the people who can hire the talent, but culinary program is a great program to have, because especially in a career academy, because every single instructional area has their own banquet.
Right.
Anytime I have guests come to my school, the culinary kids, I can use Perkins funds for the culinary kids to learn how to cook and then serve that food to the people. Like, they become your banqueting service. That's real world work.
Yep.
Seeing that stuff done like that. Yeah, that is 100%. That's awesome. That's a great example. Of how students can be involved and save. But that takes teachers who want to get out of their lesson plans, who are willing to go out and build something new, and willing to say, I don't know how to do this, and willing to say, oh, we made a mistake, right? So yeah, I love that. That is a phenomenal example. And so when you disrupt ed tech, you get into that point where you're saying, look, there's really only one, like two. I use Google because that's our school's system, right? There's really only one other main component of education technology that I use, and that's UScience. Everything else I have found ways to offset with free tools. And you can do that. You can save your school money. Your kids can build these solutions. It's what a great opportunity. Man, I am so floored at that example, Peter. That is a phenomenal example.
Yeah.
I definitely see the ed tech graveyard coming. So my husband is in software sales, ironically, and but ERP. And 20 years ago, there was like hundreds of ERP companies,
Hmm.
and now there are like 6 or 7 because they have just disappeared, consolidated, merged,
Yeah,
and
been
there's
bought.
literally like this website about like ERP graveyards and like it's a whole, it's like a family tree
Yeah,
of it. But I see some of
nothing
that
like some gallows humor there, Allie.
Right.
I mean, here's the deal. That being said, I think there's an opportunity though here for
Mm,
ed tech, if you're listening, to partner with schools, maybe.
absolutely,
Um,
man. Yeah,
Such an opportunity there.
Hmm.
And I kind of want to, hear, like, I think there are places where ed tech fits and it can be really meaningful. And I think partnership is
mhm,
certainly a wave of the future of how it can be integrated into community and school to benefit
yeah,
both. So you're promoting youth science, and I'm
yeah,
just, I'm leaning in because I'm like, well,
yeah,
why?
yeah.
Right? So give us a little bit, like
Oof.
you you managed to pull away everything else, but you still use
Yeah,
youth science. Why?
yeah. Well, I mean, so first I'll say this, and this is unique. I've been this is my 20th year teaching, so I've seen a lot, you know. Um, every other ed tech company that I've really dealt with, every other one, it's usually ed tech dealing with central office, ed tech dealing with the decision makers.
Hmm.
Um, and I've never told you science this, but one of the main things I love about UScience, and this has nothing to do with their product, this has nothing to do with their people. They are an ed tech company that is actually about kids. Like they interact with kids. They're like that's their heart. That's their passion. And so you want to see a big guy like me, 6'3", 250, get emotional, like start seeing people put kids first. And so I love when I see U Science do that. So yeah, people are like, you work for U Science? I'm like, no, I don't. Like I've done some consulting things, I've read some materials for them and I've shared my input with them, but no, I'm not employed by U Science. But I'm not scared to leverage whatever capital and whatever equity I have in this space to say, here's a company that gets it right. And that's not even dealing with their product. Now their product is second to none. And so we can talk about nerd out about that all day long. But basically, it is a career assessment tool. And every other career assessment tool, their only variable is interest. So when you ask a student to go out and to take a test, and I'm going to give you some feedback on that, the data yield is going to be careers that align to your interest, right? Well, one, kids don't really need me to tell them what they're interested in. They know what they're interested in. Two, interests are ephemeral. So why am I going to advise a student on something that may be different tomorrow? But what UScience does is it gives them interest with data, but it layers it with aptitude. And they have a proprietary uh, code. They own the company, but basically they have the proprietary way of layering aptitude on top of that. So you want to talk about breaking down socioeconomic, gender, cultural, racial, any type of barrier that exists. You give a student that assessment and it pushes past all the competitors' interest-based analysis and it gives them an interest plus aptitude base. So what's that
Hmm.
really mean? So you, Jason, you're talking nerd here. Why do I use it? Why do I love it? Because I can take a student who thinks or they're interested in over here doing this, right? But I can look at their U Science results and say, and filter all the results and take out interest and say, here are all the careers that you may not even know exist, but that your skills are a really good match for. And so what have I done in an instant is I've broadened their horizons. I've given that student who's going to go to college to get a degree to do this and then find out 15 years later, oh man, I love this.
Hmm.
I'm giving the opportunity to learn that now before they've gone into degrees and careers and debt to pursue something. And it's all about making the student empowered. It's not about saying, do this, don't do this. It's about saying, here's all the options. And so I really don't like interest because really the term interest, I really prefer the term exposure because a student can't be interested in something they haven't been exposed to.
Yep.
U
Yep.
Science exposes them to things that they may have never known. So when I say it breaks down these socioeconomic and demographic barriers, let's say you're from a community that only has logging, right?
Mm-hmm.
And your dad was a logger, your granddad was a logger, your great granddad was in forestry. That's what you grew up doing. That's what you want to do. Well, what if you tested really high in aptitude for engineering? Now I can say, hey, look, you can go into the logging industry, but you tested really high in machining and engineering. So have you ever thought about going to school to be an engineer? And then you can be the person who designs the equipment and develops the processes that makes the logging industry better. So you're still in logging, you're just into logging as an engineer, right?
Yeah.
Now the kids' horizons are broadened and expanded. It also takes a student who may be from a single parent home. Maybe they don't have a dad, maybe they've been there with mom. So they're exposed to more traditionally feminine careers, right? Well, now I can take this and expose the kid not to careers that they see at the house, but careers that actually match their skill sets. And then I can go and have the students do some explorations. And so what UScience says is it's not just that one trick pony. They can go in, they can filter their results, overall interest or aptitude, either one of those three ways. Then they can find the career they like. They can explore majors that will get them that career, colleges that offer those majors, and then scholarships and demographic data about the universities that offer those majors that will get them the job and the career they were just exposed to. It is a one-stop shop. They can go and they can plan college applications. They can get a little checklist and go in and say, here are the 4 schools I'm interested in. And it'll say, have you done this? Have you done this? SAT, all these checklists. So going back to our conversation about counselors, UScience is the stopgap for where counselors don't have the time to do. And it's not saying school counselors, I'm not saying they do it on purpose, but we all have a limit, right? There's only so much Alli Dahl and Peter Hostrawser they can go around. So what happens when I can take our counselors and I can augment their offerings with the software and ed tech that has my students' best interest at heart, that exposes them to academic and career areas, that exposes them to colleges and trade schools, that exposes them to schools or jobs that need education and jobs that don't. They can filter their results by school, that jobs that don't have zero requirement for post-secondary education. Like I can go to work right now. They can filter all their results based on that. They can go in and look at and build a resume in UScience so I mean, when I say like, Alli, we could legit have like 3 more episodes if you like. UScience is the sharpest arrow in my quiver. It allows me to serve students, to put them in a position to succeed, even when I may not have the time to really sit down and do as much as I want to with them. It can augment me and their counselor, and I can say, this is where it's the engine that drives our reverse career fair. That's what the students use to prepare for the reverse career fair, and it is second to none. And no, I don't work for UScience.
No, yeah, I really like that. I've had friends take their kids in the late start or maybe the late areas, or junior, senior years of high school. I've got a good friend who went into an aptitude test at that level. It was a little late. But I mean, he came back and it was a firm that did it. And yeah, he's paying like a couple $100 for this. So that's just saying the value of understanding an aptitude throughout a process and it also, I don't know if you said this, but it builds confidence in young people, right?
Yeah.
And
because how often the kids, especially within special education, I can actually take their vocations and apply that into their transition plan, which every student has to have.
right.
But how many students, think about it, how many students come to school and it's always about, in your science class, Alli, it's always about, hey, look, this is where you're not really doing well in chemistry, right?
Right.
It's always about, here's where you're not doing, here's where you need to improve. UScience allows me to celebrate my kid wherever they are. I can say, look, you are really good. You are a gifted brainstormer. You are a gifted with vocabulary. You are gifted as a generalist. You can go in and I can celebrate, even if the kid is just really a tough kid, like to teach.
Yeah.
You can find something in their results and you can champion them.
Yep.
And now they go from being in your class to, Miss Dahl's now my teacher. That's a big transition to, I'm in Miss Dahl's class to she's my teacher. Like they've taken ownership. UScience allows me to take ownership of this relationship because the kids know Mr. V knows me. I can get at least 1, 2, 3 good things about every kid and know we can celebrate this. And that kid leaves, some of those kids leave never having been celebrated at school before. How many kids are like that across the country?
Yeah.
Their entire K through 12 experience is always,
Yep.
you got to get better here, you got to get better here, you got to get better here. But this is like, you know what? This is where you're good. How can we build on this?
Yeah.
And then we start building from that. So absolutely, that is a phenomenal point, Peter.
Yeah. They're
Talking about,
yeah.
I was just going to say real quickly, that's a really good way to help students self-advocate is show them their strengths.
Absolutely. And it tells them even their weaknesses. It'll say, hey, Alli, because you're an extroverted brainstormer, here's some things you're really good at. And this is all part of the U-Science results, but we'll also say, here's some things you may struggle with. So now I can take a student, case in point, let's say the student is in your class and they're on day one, they're talking when you're talking, and you're like, hey, little buddy, little Johnny, pay attention. Day two, the same thing. Hey, little Johnny, we already had this conversation. Day three, that kid's out of here. They're at the principal's office. I'm writing them up, right? Well, what if I reference that student's U-Science results and found out that they were an extroverted brainstormer and they're not being a turd. They're trying to learn the way their brain learns.
Right.
Talking to others, generating ideas. Now I can sit there and say, now it's a PBIS strategy. Now I've pulled that student out of the behavior intervention system or the behavior system. I've intervened and I said, hey, look, I know you're an extroverted brainstormer. That's great. I am too. Here's where you're going to do really good. But when we're lecturing, here's how you focus and stay attention. And now it's gone from being a behavior problem to now I've remediated that student and the student, I'm now their champion. So even on a little thing like that, just knowing how the student thinks, it allows you to go in and just do some really next level stuff. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, I think that's strategic. That's really strategic teaching as well. It also takes like, guess what? If you're if you're lecturing the entire period, maybe you got the problem, right? Like you got to remember like seven minutes maximum, and then changing up these things. The other thing that, I'm going to go back to ed tech companies. And I'm just going to just one thing that we are looking at doing. We haven't done it yet, but hey, listen. And if you're an ed tech company, you should probably really hear this. If you want to get into a school and working with the school, number one, you got to solve a problem, and you got to solve it like probably, kind of like I think like what you said there, Jason, about U-Science being the extra piece that can help counselors and students come together, and that gets communicated. That is a legit real problem. One of the things that we're thinking about doing, and we are starting to hold some of our vendors accountable for this, is if you are going to work with our school, you're going to take at least one of our interns. You're going to take them.
Oh, that's legit.
You better open up a spot.
No, yeah, I'm writing it down right now. I love it.
And that is something that's going to there is a win-win. Number one, like our students are your clients, and our clients are going to help you find gaps. Period. And number two, like our students understand things. And if you want to see the culture of our school, here they are. Right. And again, economics, right. That is something that we're looking at there as well. And, I think these experiences, it just goes into really putting students into their own communities, their own places. There's a lot of why, but I think there's a lot of why nots that I think we need to start taking a look at. Going back to the terms in the words that we use. I actually don't, and I think you brought this up, Jason, or maybe Alli, you did, is I don't like the term teacher. I don't even like that term.
Yep.
I like coach, mentor, champion, whatever it is. Maybe you get to argue with ChatGPT on this a little bit more. So, but I don't like that term, because teacher used to be, and I think
it's passive.
It's
active for me, but it's passive.
I'm the one who has the information, and I can give it to you, and it kind of pulls out some things in my mind. I mean, I'm not a linguist or anything, but far from it. But I really don't like that term. I think, and I like the fact that you're like, Alli is my teacher now. But I think Alli's my coach. Alli's my advocate on chemistry or something like that. I think if we change
I think
that
a way to turn the corner there is I've used this term, but I've never really done it in that way, but I will now, is I've always called them practitioners. Like I am an educational practitioner. And the reason is because I practice. And when you practice, sometimes we talked about just a little while ago, you fail.
Dude.
And so I think the same way you practice medicine, medicine is not it's a science, it's not an exact science. Well, education is a science and it's an art, but you're going to fail. And so I mean, I've never thought of it in those terms of not using teacher, but yeah, I'm an educational practitioner and my job is to practice and find out what's the best opportunity for these students.
Mhm.
I think one of it, we've said it, but maybe not explicitly, but one of the things I'm hearing is just a seemingly revolutionary way to disrupt education is one, just involve students in areas that are seemingly obvious, get them involved. And then two, I think there's a real opportunity to better understand your community, the offerings that your community has, the businesses in your community, the people in your community, and how to network with them. Like it you do it with your programming, but I'm thinking about schools that I've been in or teachers I know, and there might be one person or one counselor, and the capacity is far too high for them. But like, what would it take for a school to be like, okay, everybody's going to reach out to three people, and then
Yeah.
we're going to create, and students too, and like collectively get a better understanding. But I think like if you're an individual contributor,
Yeah.
quote unquote, right, you've got your silo and you're trying to disrupt on your own, one way you can do that and then not be alone is to dive deeper into your community. I think it's so untapped. We've heard on so many episodes this year, from Sandra Adams to Mark Covell to you to TJ Vari, like everybody, even Bobby Miller, our shop teacher,
Yeah.
is they're reaching out to industry. They're the responses that they're getting are positive.
Yes.
People want to partner. The workplace careers, everybody, this is the time. Sandra Adams said it, the economy is on our side.
100%. I
Right?
listened to this morning.
Mhm.
Great point.
Like
It's
so
now's the time to do it, even if you're not prepared, even if you're not the most skilled, even if your program is not refined. Now is the time to do it because the economy is on your side.
Mhm.
Okay, so a lot of my growth. We talked last time about how my program had grown 500 something percent, right? A lot of that took place during COVID because you know what happened during COVID? Our government was incentivizing adults to stay home. So there's only one demographic that was available to work, and so a lot of my program grew during COVID because adults were being paid to stay home. So high school kids had to step up and bridge that gap. And so it's a very similar thing now in terms of the economy is that the economy is behind people saying labor is expensive. We're having to untrain them from bad habits. Let's partner with high schools. Let's build our own. That way we don't have to untrain them from bad habits because they're learning our culture, our way. We can onboard them and then we can try to retain that talent long term. Now, your example earlier of the people who are leaving your community, and it is a drain on your community's taxes and return on investment. Now you're capitalizing on it. So not only are you no longer losing it, you're going to start seeing an economic boom in your community because you're actually going to have more taxable people living in your community versus maybe commuting in from 20, 30, 40 miles away. Because they may make their money here, but if they go out to another community and live, there's not going to be much of a tax base difference here, right? So it's about building your own from inside of your community. And that's where you see those partnerships. And it just takes one. People are like, oh, it's a lot of work. It is a lot of work, but start with one, make it work, and then leverage that success story with every other person in your community. That is the model for how to build that.
And have your writing class or your marketing class tell the story. It's right
Yep.
there. Like everything within, I mean, I'm telling you, like everything, like, we get so into, oh, well, I've got to market it. No, you don't. You've got
Yeah.
kids who are communicators, they want to be writers. They want to be in marketing and advertising. There they
They
are.
want to take control of your social media.
And make those projects, makes everything projects. Everything needs to be, and I feel it, man. I'm really feeling like this really kind of good, this is a foundation, I think, for a lot of our listeners to really start to take a look at, okay, let's just stop the silo thing. I mean, you don't have to cold turkey it, but like it all goes back, and I know it goes back to your instructor, Jen Sharp, Alli. for skydiving is get lazy, right? You don't have to create all the curriculum, but by getting lazy means
Mhm.
getting creative, having people come in with their problems, push the kids through the problems, let them
Mhm.
grind through it. You don't have to front end load everything.
Mm-mm.
I hate that.
Yeah.
I do not front end load things. Let them struggle with it. Let them fail safely. Talk them
Yeah.
through it and fix it, and then go forward while you're creating a community of learners. I don't
And
know.
this goes back for me for back when I was so if anyone goes back and watches that video where I'm talking about the mentors I mentioned earlier, right?
Mhm.
Bob Jones is my former principal, and he, man, I'm the teacher I am, however you want to qualify or quantify that, because of him and Dr. Hankley, who I mentioned in that video. Um, and like he did that for me. We were having this conversation on what school should be, and he was like, why is our drama program paying a construction company to come in and build their set? Why isn't our construction class building the set? Why isn't our culinary class like catering the chamber meeting we're having at our school today?
Mhm.
Why isn't our marketing team going to the video broadcast program and building the resource that we put on? I mean, like every single instructional program should work together.
Mhm.
And every I mean, and so it's we're not just siloed academic and vocational or academic and career tech. We're also siloed inside of career tech.
Mhm.
So we
Right.
can't throw too many stones, right? Because we're siloed ourselves.
Yeah.
If we want to really be that and live that, we've got to start using those resources that
Mhm.
other teachers, other content experts have and saying, hey, I have this event. I need you to, I want, would marketing be interested in promoting this? And would audio, video come and film it and put
Right.
together this promotional thing I can send out at my next presentation, whatever. Like that is how all schools, not just career academies, but all
Mhm.
schools should work.
Right.
Every one of them.
Yeah.
Every one of them.
I love this. We're disrupting education, one podcast conversation at a time, and it's free.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, 100%.
That out because schools also pay tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars for professional development, and you just got a value of that in this episode and the last one, not to mention all the close to 400 episodes that we'll have at the time of this one coming out. Just
Exactly. I
say,
think, just kind of bring this whole thing back around. I think that's our number one thing here. Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a moment, and I'm pretty sure I put this out on LinkedIn somewhere. And again, we always go back to LinkedIn, which is funny. Is haters, waiters, and doers, right? I mean, you can teach for 25 years this one class, or you can teach 25 years of just trying new things, and that you're either a teacher who teaches the same thing over and over again, or you, like you said, Jason, a practitioner. I'm gonna do something a little bit different every year or every semester and try some different things. You can, and it just depends on comfort level. But I tell you what, you do not live until I'm going to theoretically use your analogy here, Allie. You don't live in a classroom until you jump out of it and
Yeah.
pull the ripcord. Like there is such a, I, people ask, like we were in a newer teacher meeting a couple of weeks ago, and people ask, what do you do when you get home, And I'm the only one, and I was probably the oldest in the room because I move around schools. So there's a lot of younger teachers in there. And I was pretty much the only one that kind of said, and I don't mean this like to pat myself on the back, but like I go home and I podcast and I talk to people and I write and I'm still kind of just going. And I think to our point here is when you are a practitioner, you are excited about what you're doing. Is it mentally challenging? Is it? Yes, of course. Is it draining? Yeah, it is, but it's exciting as all hell. I mean, I am sorry, that's just the way it is. And I love it. I love it. And I think these conversations are where they're at. It's just something like Ali said. There's so much to take out of these. I can't tell you how many legal notebooks I have from our conversations. So, But, with that being said, obviously you want to connect with us on LinkedIn all across the board. You're going to see all different kinds of things. Jason, thank you so much for hanging out with us for a couple of episodes. Again, it's in the springtime and this comes out, and I am just driving right through the summer. I love it. So thank you so much for sharing all your experiences, man.
And I'm glad to be a part. And like I said, I love these conversations. It's fun. Like we have these conversations often and they're not really taped. So it's not new to just turn the camera on, right? Because we have this chat conversations, everything else. So thank you all for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll look forward to more arguments with ChatGPT. For Alli Dahl, I'm Peter Hostrawser. Hey, don't forget to like and subscribe. And guess what? This is a PD. And you can run it however you want. Share it out with your colleagues in education, in your learning communities, wherever you are. We appreciate you listening, and we'll catch you next week on the Disrupt Education podcast. We'll see you later. That's a wrap on this episode of the Disrupt Education podcast. Let's keep the momentum going. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share this episode out.
If you want to dive deeper into disrupting education, visit our website at disrupteducationpodcast.com.
Here's the bottom line. We believe real change in education starts locally. It happens when communities come together to rethink learning. If you're an educator, school leader, or organization looking to take action towards real change in education, we are here to help. Reach out and connect.
And we'd love to hear your thoughts on today's episode. So drop us a line wherever you listen. And until next time, take that bold step beyond your comfort zone. Challenge the status quo and be the change education truly needs.
Because at the end of the day, education isn't just about subjects. It's about students. And when we dare to disrupt, the future of learning is waiting.